is nice.
Snow is the best, and I'm sure you can find a bit of word out of the show. But yes, emotional energy is a thing, and sometimes you don't have it. So it's gonna be us. Yeah, you already know who we're saying where. Already know me. I'm Scheurle, I'm a game designer. I have not made personally any Twine games myself, but I use it as a teaching device whenever I teach people how to make video games. And I'm going to be your host and moderator today to speak about how you can start making games using a wonderful little tool that is very well known enough, called Twine. So before I tell you a little bit more about Twine and what it is and what we do with it, I would like to introduce my panelists. Meadows, who is the maker of, you need to
Alcyone.
yourself. Okay, start with you, Joshua.
So I'm co-director of GX Australia, if you don't know that already. I'm also a writer and a video game developer. I have a game, Alcyone, The Last City, which is an interactive fiction game, which I'm doing in Twine with a lot of custom stuff on top of it, which I want to show you as we go on. And accidentally, it certainly wasn't intentional. Jennifer has done level design and will be doing writing for Alcyone. And John King is one of my stretch goals for the Kickstarter. That was just funded like 3 hours ago. Yes. So, my dream of having it happen on GX Weekend came true, and I'm very excited about that. Look for it on Kickstarter.
So busy that we did it. Yes.
I'm John Kane, and I'm a game designer and developer. I've released on Steam a game called Killing Time at Lightspeed, which was not built in Twine exactly. It was all HTML and JavaScript, and so a lot of the things that I used to publish that game on Steam can just be plugged into a Twine file instead of what I wrote. I've also done on Kotaku a ongoing series called The Iron Controller, which was a reimagining of the Iron Fist with Kotaku's director Mark Searle's fighting for control of Kotaku Australia. And that was a very illustration-based project, and so getting images, and I pretty much started writing a custom theme for that before we had any dialogue or image assets. So
Cool. Okay, I will do. We did the whole thing without microphones, but because you're all microphone people, I will use a microphone now. I'm trying to not be super loud. Cool. So, just quick show of hands. Who knows Twine? Let's try that. Okay, that's something. Who has worked with Twine in any capacity? It's just a tiny little thing. Awesome. That is great. So, still for the ones who don't really know what Twine is, I'll just give a super short introduction. It's a free online tool. You can reach it via twinery.org. You can use it online or offline, that's completely up to you. Designed to easily create text adventure style games with branching dialogue and narrative. It can be used for more complex things, but that's the base version of it, basically. The simplest version allows even for people with no coding knowledge to create convincing game experiences that are mainly revolving around text-based narrative, and branching narrative, and dialogue, and so on. We go a little bit more into detail on what else you can do with the tool. I sometimes use it beyond making a game and use it for branching dialogue that I just want to play out, because you can easily save your current work and your current dialogue tree to just check if your dialogue flow is good. So sometimes I use it as a tool as a game designer as well, beyond just making a full game with it. Right, let's get into some questions. Maybe you can tell me a little bit more about why you decided to use Twine. Like, why is Twine the go-to tool for what you are doing with it right now?
Do you want to maybe start with why you didn't use Twine for Killing Time at Lightspeed?
Yeah.
And that might be a good segue into...
Yeah, well, a reason that I use Twine, certainly in prototype phase, is it's fast. You just type the things that you want and maybe grab some brackets and stuff. It is really fast to kind of test an idea and see if that branching structure plays out the way you think it is going to. But the reason I didn't use Twine for Killing Time at Lightspeed was I was writing, I think it ended up being, a couple of thousand pieces of just 140 character tweets that would all be put into a dynamic timeline, and I was more comfortable coding that in my own JavaScript framework than in Twine, in trying to figure out macros to do it. So that ended up just being, reading from a giant data file and putting it out in a structure, which is more non-linear in a page than Twine really allows in a clean way.
So I use Twine for this because I'm a shithouse programmer, to put it politely.
I should preface maybe that my day job is an HTML JavaScript programmer, so I will start writing all the frameworks and all the story formats before I start actually doing macros and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable writing my own engine than I am with writing a story.
Well, I said in the narrative design panel last night that I think I'll figure out how to translate ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs before I figure out C#. So Twine appealed to me because, hey, I don't know how to program, but I used to work as a web developer, so I did shit JavaScript on sites like some Yahoo backend things that I discovered were recently still being used, and I don't know why, because I don't know what I'm doing there. But I am really good with CSS, and at its heart, Twine is a website, and it gives you this output that's basically a website. So if you've got any sort of web development skills, you can do something with it, and that's what it appealed to me, because, oh, cool, I can make this, and it looks like a game, and I don't know how to make games, and I'm all for accessibility. That's obviously a big thing of the atmosphere here. So up until fairly recently, engines like Unity were prohibitively expensive, or Unreal was also quite expensive. So not only did you need to pay a lot of money for licensing fees, but you also had to have a powerful enough computer to run the engine and the tool sets. And engines like Twine make it a lot easier if you don't, have those resources to still make a game. And I think that's why it's so popular amongst the queer game development community, because it is very democratic. Anyone can download it, and you don't even have to download it now. You can just run it off the website.
Okay, so let's do a plug with your games here, because I just want people to see a little bit how Twine works and how you use it. And so can you talk to me, or even maybe show me a little bit about the games you made with Twine, specifically with Twine?
Do you want to give me your age, like Yeah, just. I'll try not to knock over everything.
So yeah, just so you can get a little bit of an idea of what that looks like if you haven't seen it before. Overall, Twine features.
We've got mirror. Hold on.
Like a structure of nodes that you can plug into each other, and that function like a dialog tree. So whenever you can connect certain words or even full sentences to another node, so whenever you click on them, you will move to that node as a text adventure kind of dialog tree kind of thing. We will get into a little bit more about what else you can do beyond that, but that's the basic functionality of what Twine does.
And I do kind of do it a little bit differently. You can kind of see a little bit in the left-hand side, because it's typically you do branching narratives, so sort of choose your own adventure type things. And I can't say that because they're more litigious than most game companies and have very tight control over choose your own adventure. But basically you use these nodes and then they're all connected to one another. And that's not how I've done it, because I've overcomplicated my life by encoding like all of the graphics in Base64. So I'm using all of those as So this, sorry,
It's really small.
I might be able to. Let me see what I can do.
You should be able to zoom.
Maybe I'll do it that way. Does that make life easier? I mean, so this huge wall of text is actually an image, and that ends up being that. So that's not relevant to what we're talking about right now, except that the structure that you see here isn't exactly how a Twine game is typically done, but that's what I like about the engine so much, because if you don't have any programming skills, you can make a game really quickly. If you do have programming skills, you can do things like this, where this huge wall of text is now an image that can be referenced outside of each little node.
So maybe we can just quickly, just for the ones who haven't really worked with Twine, can you go into one of your notes and explain the setup and what it does?
I can, actually, I've got a, so this is probably more similar to what the typical Twine game would be. And this was a demo that I did last year, which is related to a novel series that I run. So you've got a wall of text, and then you click something, and then you've got options and so on.
So the links are basically the ones that you click that connect you to another node. So whenever Joshua clicks on one of those links, that can be anywhere in the text, it takes you to the connected node to that certain link. Okay?
Yeah. So you can see on the actual, so this screen right here is basically Twine itself, and you can see these arrows pointing from one box to another, and that's where the internal link is for each. If you click on this, it's going to take you to this passage versus this one. I can have internet. Yeah, hold on.
So yeah, the way I usually use it in class or with beginners of Twine is a regular text adventure style game where you write a branching narrative where you can just click through. You can do very, very clever things with that. I've seen a game that is fairly popular, I can't remember its name, that is famous for being just like a 5-minute experience, and you go through it, and I'm going to spoil it a little bit for you because it's not like people are going to find it. A person going to work, and you just like make breakfast, and you go through the different rounds, and you can repeat the day after you finish the day, but you will find out that the person you're playing has murdered the actual inhabitant of the house, and you find the body under the bed. And it's super weird because you could totally, the way Twine works, and that's the trick of it, have figured it out in the first place if you chose the right option, but most people just wouldn't because of the way the narrative is set up. So it's very clever, you can do very clever little things with it, set flags and so on. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is John's game that is based on that.
Yeah, this is the iron controller. Things. So just click around and I'll explain. So we wanted to do a series of like interactive stories that would play on the website, and so we.
Yeah, I'm really impressed that it's embedded in there directly. So again, the extensibility of Twine.
Yeah, and this is like really simple coding for their point of view. Like it's just a type of HTML tag called an iframe that just like puts another web page in a box, and so yeah,
You got a huge list of choices and everything.
yeah. So one of the main kind of things that we did for this that was cool was the pacing of using what's called a macro to replace text on a panel versus actually having the whole thing. So if it was like in a chain of thoughts, we would just replace that text. Then when that was done, we would move to the entire panel. And like, yeah, moving the text all around the screen with CSS to just kind of like make it a bit disorienting. And yeah, Twine was super good for this because it works on everything. This works on the mobile side, this works everywhere.
Yeah, and well, I can get into it when we go on.
so maybe we can from here take it a little bit further and talk a little bit about the potential of Twine beyond branching narrative. Because if you know a little bit of coding, a little bit of JavaScript, a little bit of CSS, then you can do even more fancy things with it. Maybe you can just explain the potential of Twine beyond the basics.
So I use it in, I probably should go back to the actual story again. I use it in mine for things like, if you've ever played Fall in London, or heard of some, let's see, this was very much inspired by Fail Better Games, who were very gracious in saying, we won't sue you, which is nice. So I use it for things like, Fail Better is known for doing quality-based narrative versus, I guess, choice-based, so that you progress through the game and you pick up what they call qualities. And I took that and was very inspired by it. So I use just a little bit of JavaScript for things like this keyword system. So as a player goes through the game, if they see a term that's highlighted green at the moment, it can be moused over and tapped, and it gives them some extra definition. So from a story perspective, it let me make the world more immersive without huge walls of plot exposition that would be complicated to read, or maybe you saw the term at the beginning of the game and then it came up later on and you couldn't remember what it was. So it makes it easier for that, and to do that in a way that would make my life easier rather than hard code that definition in a million places. I just did a super complicated JavaScript thing that basically what it does is it kind of scans through the game for keywords, and when it finds them, it replaces the surrounding code in the game to something that is a CSS tooltip. So again, if you have a little bit of programming skills, you can do things like that, and I stretched my programming ability to the very limit. And so people who are much better than me can do a lot more with it as well.
Yeah, the thing that I'm working on at the moment is I have killing time at light speed running on my phone, and this is the exact same code that is in the Steam version of the game. It is just compiled differently, and I'm working on a compiler that should let pretty much anyone who makes a Twine game do Steam, which is PC, Mac, Linux, and also do iOS and Android from one.
That is so cool.
One button click, and hopefully when the ports for Killing Time are out, I'll just release that. You can just download and install it, and this is exactly the setup that will make all of that work, and you won't have to code anything. At the moment, so the things that I use are like what's called Node.js.
I'm just popping up Web2.exe to get.
So yeah. So this is a GUI tool, like a user interface.
Because again, I can't program, so.
Yeah. So
it lets you basically, so when you make your Lovely Little Twine game, you export it as a HTML file.
Yeah.
And when you've made your HTML file, because I've already got this set up, I'm just going to drag and drop it. So once you've made your HTML file, this tool, and there's a couple of them, but I like this one because it's cross-platform. It's called Web2 Executable, and I like it quite a lot because it does one-click Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, and it also does 64-bit versions of Windows and Linux in the event that you need to do that. So you just make it, and it does use the same node.
yeah, this is just a
Front
tool
end.
that uses the same code that I use, but I used like kind of the bad DOS version that doesn't have a nice interface, because I use a JavaScript library called Greenworks, which is by I think they're New Zealand guys. It's the guys who made Game Dev Simulator. And for their Steam integration, they just wrote probably the best library in the world for doing Steam stuff from HTML. And for Twine, you would probably just include it as like the way you just make a passage and paste the JavaScript thing in there. And then a tool like this would just spit out an executable file and it would work with Steam. And that's, again, that's something I'm integrating into the giant compiler thing that I'm working on.
And I'm really super interested in that tool in particular because it will make my life a lot easier. Because at the moment, it's downloadable as an executable file, but the Steam integration and all of that, and stuff like achievements.
Yeah, the way they've done it, like, it's literally just do achievement and then you type the achievement name. It's like, it's coding, but it really isn't coding because they've done all of the really hard, buggy stuff for you.
Yeah, I'm just waiting because it decided it's going to update
Oh, no.
the version of Node. And so basically once you use this tool, you've got your HTML file from Twine, and then you have this one that packages it up in a nice little file that you can then send to someone. So if you just send someone the HTML file, it'll work in their browser. But if you send them this file, it's an application. And I guess it's the difference between giving someone your email address at Gmail and Hotmail versus at my custom domain name. Not only does it look more professional, but it's more polished and so on.
Yeah, I really would love to go into like, asking a whole bunch of Twine creators like what the percentage of like how many people actually pay for their games is, but generally people are more willing to pay for something that is downloaded rather than runs in a browser.
Yeah.
I think Itch has put out the stats on that.
I think that the perception as well as that you're buying a product versus
Reading it.
reading a web page.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to people just not really understanding what Twine does
Yeah, absolutely.
and what they perceive as a valuable product. So having it as an executable, I think, was essential for the Kickstarter that you run for this game.
Yeah.
Given that people will take it more seriously because it was customized and polished, and because people don't quite understand the process of game development and how we make games, they don't understand that because it's not a download, not an executable, doesn't mean that the game is somehow created with less effort.
Yeah, it is all just mental tricks. It's a thing I really like is there are like USB stick readers for TVs, and they'll put a weight in there because really all it is it's plastic that reads a USB stick in quotation mark, but they'll put a weight in there so it feels heavier and is more valuable. And making the executable file is just that. It's just a mental trick that makes people think that like, oh, this is worth more.
Yeah.
And it sucks that we have to do that, but it absolutely does work. And
Can we do questions later? Is that okay? Just keep it. Just really quick because you've had it open just then and it was really cool. Speaking of mental tricks and making your game look more valuable, which is,
Yep.
we're only looking at this through the lens of the consumer. Your game is totally valuable if you don't do all the stuff.
yeah,
We know this, but consumers. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you've done with your games to make them visually attractive, because that is a really important part of using Twine, maybe for a commercial product. Because customizing it and making it visually appealing and look less like your standard Twine game is quite important. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the art style and how you achieve what you've achieved.
I'll actually even just while you're talking, I'll mock up a really quick example to show you what it looks like by default.
I was hoping to open up the browser again.
Oh yeah, I can do that. So it's even easier.
Cool.
Saves me time.
So, yep. No. It is actually Bootstrap 386. So a lot of web developers would use a so that's what Bootstrap 386 looks like. It looks like old DOS terminal stuff. This is just an open source library. All of Killing Time is based on this. And I made it black and yellow because that's where my kind of like aesthetic for DOS stuff comes from. But it's absolutely easy to download free simply, like with a bit of copy and pasting, you don't actually have to code new stuff. Convert that to a Twine story format. You know, by just sort of taking the sugar cube, the default Twine story format.
Which looks like this by default.
Yeah. You can copy and paste its JavaScript bits at the top and bottom into that Bootstrap 386 thing, and then copy that into your Twine story formats folder. Then you get Twine that looks like DOS, and it's super easy, and you didn't actually have to code anything.
One really big trick that I did, so Twine outputs basically what's effectively a web page. So you mouse over something and you see how the cursor has now become a text select cursor. This doesn't happen in games. So the easiest way to trick people mentally into not realizing that they're playing a website is to use just a little bit of CSS. And I'm clicking on this and now it no longer selects that. And when you mouse over text in the game, it no longer looks like that. And it's literally one line pop-up. I don't even look at my code.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, the other thing that you can do, I've just selected some text on my phone. If you do want it to feel like a website, you can customize what that selection looks like, so it still looks like DOS selecting.
Yeah. So there's just a tiny bit of CSS changes the game, its feel mentally, so that again, customer perception is that I'm not looking at a website, I'm playing an actual game.
Yeah, and I was specifically replicating a website for killing time, so.
And then for mine, I added a bunch of artwork, which you can see in the executable version. It's got music, and there I have little, if you look, there's a little subtle effect around the both the attributes thing that's now highlighted green, and then also the choice box below it. So basically, little UI tweaks that make it feel more like an interactive game. And I had an early version of it where those boxes, instead of gently glowing right now, would kind of shake a little bit, which I thought looked really cool, and all of the feedback was, it looks awesome, I can't read anything in that. So I scrapped it even though I thought it looked awesome. But it was getting in the way of the functionality, but you can do things like that.
Yeah, learning CSS, like you can, most of the JavaScript and macros, like you can search for Twine macro, how to do this, you know, replacing text. They use it. People have been coding those for ages and they just plug into Twine. Learning how to do CSS is super valuable as a skill, not just for making games, but like it's a hireable skill. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you know, making stuff look good in a browser is my day job and I get paid far more than I do making games. For now, until I finally crack, you know, making people feel sad in space, that there's like a Flappy Bird.
Although that said, I did web design, and I probably stopped doing it as a job in 2004, and CSS in particular has changed significantly since then. HTML5 didn't exist when I was doing it as a profession, so I Googled the fuck out of most of the things that either I can't remember how to do it anymore, or I Google how can I make this happen, and it gets you a lot of the way.
Yeah, you can Google any solution in CSS, and it's probably what you see for you, and you can just copy it.
Cut and paste.
So the next question is taking a little bit of a step back from the technical bits and pieces and goes a little bit more into writing in Twine, which can be quite fun when you do a small short story, but as soon as you go into something proper, big, with a million branching things, how do you keep sane? How do you have any tips and tricks for writing gigantic branching narrative flags for?
I have a lot of post-it
like,
notes.
how do you keep track?
Yeah, I have a lot of post-it notes. Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
make little webs all over the place.
For killing time, a lot of what feels like branching structure is fake. And so like if you can make someone think that the tree of branches of possibilities are a lot bigger than it is. And probably the tip for keeping sane as far as like making a giant project is don't actually make it a giant project, make it feel like a giant project that the person is just taking one path through. Because if you write 1,000 passages in Twine and a person sees 10 of them, like it's cool, but unless you do some amazing stuff with structure and replayability, they might not like replay through to get 1,000 different outcomes.
Can you maybe get into it a little bit more? Because like just from an educator's perspective, I have to explain this to my students a lot. A lot of the games that you play, for example, Telltale games, use that method a lot, and they are fantastic at tricking people into believing that the game has a million choices, but actually doesn't. So don't ever replay a Telltale game because you would totally tell.
You will totally break.
It will totally break your game. Just play it once. But can you go a little bit from a design perspective into how you can trick people into believing that?
Well, just for this one, there's the character selection, which I don't have the fancy arrows because I'm calling these passages through code instead of the default Twine way. But the player goes through the character select, and then they've got a choice of multiple internships. And all of those choices then filter back into the same section. So no matter what they do there, it all goes into this. But then I'm probably a terrible person to ask because the whole draw of this project in particular is that there are thousands of choices that the player will only see a fraction of, and it's very heavily about playing through it and experiencing different things. And I've worked to quickly get the player to a point where when they start over, unlike restarting Dragon Age Origins where you've got a 6-hour tutorial before you get into the game, there's a lot of repetitive content before you actually get to a point where you're seeing the parts of the game that you missed. That's the whole sell of this game in particular.
Yeah, I think like the basic definition of the trick is, some kids are messing around on the street and like one of them tries to pick your pocket and you chase him and he ducks left and the person comes in the way and you shove that person or like try and go around them, and that feels like a meaningful choice in the moment. But like really, either way, that kid gets away with your money, and that kid was always going to get away with your money because you were in that town at the beginning. Like it feels like a thing, that chain of events that happens dynamically. The thing that makes it feel real is just like having a little callback to that, did you push the guy moment? Like, oh, you bumped into him later, and he goes, you pushed me. Or he goes, oh, yeah, did you catch that kid? It validates the entire chain of choices that you made up to that point. And makes it feel like, that could have gone in a bunch of different ways, but actually the thing that counted was actually that number that was your money goes down because it's important for it to be at 0 later.
I've got, in this one, if you can read it, there's a huge wall of, basically once you go through the counter, it gives you a recap of the choices that you made, and then it tells you what choices you picked and basically what you took away from that. And in Twine, it's just a matter of setting a variable, and later on in the game. So as you play through the various game pieces, you come back to parts where if the game sees it earlier, you trigger this variable. I've changed some of the writing so that you get a little bit more backstory because you picked a certain class of character. So now you get more of a dynamic sense of the world because it feels like you're influencing it and changing it.
Yeah, and just being in the habit of whenever you make the player make a choice, find some way to manually variable so you can record it cleanly, but record
And I'm not doing it.
when I start coding this, I'm probably going to have a nightmare. Record all of the choices, because then, just even if you're not planning on using them narratively, just record everything, because then
You've got the option, and you don't have to go back and realize that you made 75% of the game, and it would have been awesome if you could have had this be an impact later on.
You also have to, otherwise you can't stay sane, because you can't, you can't. I'm just telling the story because I once had a student who was trying to write this giant, random narrative story, and he was losing his mind because he couldn't keep track of all the potential ways the player could have taken, and therefore wasn't able to write properly because he wasn't sure if the player had the exact amount of information he needed for the next story bit. So you may end up hitting a real bad roadblock and have to start over or try to fix it, and will never be able to if you don't follow these rules. You need to have reported choices. You have to make sure that you have some of those choices, or probably the majority of those choices, be fake choices, even though that's not as romantic as it sounds. And have something we call story knots. So have knots in your narrative where you know where the player's at, no matter what choices they make before.
There's there's a really cool tool that I like. If anyone's ever heard of Scrivener, which is a really awesome writing tool, the same company did something called Scapple, and it basically lets you write, if it'll work, and then you can draw connections between two things, and I'm doing it really badly for some reason. But it's good for story web sort of thing, and I'm not using it for this project yet, but it is something that I have used in the past.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm a very mechanically focused person when I make a game, so I actually start with all of the structure and bare bones, what are the big choices and how does it branch out? I won't have any dialogue, but it'll just be just the links to other things before I start writing.
And then you fill in the...
Yeah, and then I fill in all of the story around the bones.
Okay, maybe one more question, then we can go into questions from the audience. So, just maybe a one or two sentences kind of thing. For people who want to start out using Twine for making a professional game, what's your tip? Where should they start? What to do?
From the very beginner point of view?
Yes.
Before you start making professional games, make really crap ones. Just download it, make things. I think if you go into it trying to make your very first game, your very successful commercial project, it's unrealistic, and you're either going to burn yourself out or you're going to be disappointed with the result. So make a lot of really shit, quick games before you start worrying about the professional ones.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that a lot of drawing artists do. We'll just do pages and pages of rough sketches as just exercises, and you don't just start out being Rembrandt or something.
It's always a myth that people have that we just have success straight away, and everyone disregards the 100 shitty things that we did before.
Yeah, and even if it's that game idea that is super precious to you, you can still make the cracked version of that and then make the version of that later. Killing Time was originally a game jam that I did in a month, and there was a lot wrong with it, and all of the interactivity was kind of faked, but again, I used tricks to make it feel like it was, but the game was...
How long of a game jam was it from?
It was a month.
Oh, okay.
So, it was bigger than a weekend. Yeah, I would seriously just do it over a weekend, and then wherever you're at the end of the weekend, stop and move on. Because you learn things by doing them, and if you just you can just reset, and then you'll have that knowledge of making it for the next thing. You'll have more of a running storytelling stuff. Anna Entropy has amazing Twine tutorials.
Yeah, Anna Entropy is a really good resource for doing really awesome things in Twine.
Cool. So we have about 15 minutes left. This is time for questions. Hands up.
I was going to ask about the quality-based storytelling that you were saying before. What does that mean?
So quality-based narrative design, it's kind of what Failbetter defines their way of storytelling for interactive fiction. That basically, you can think of them, qualities as like gear or items. So as you progress through the game, you're making choices, and the result of that choice gives you an item, be that, in my game, it's either knowledge that gets used later on as you progress through the story, or it's explicit wearable items. And they do something similar with also gear, or the choices that you make impact attributes that then unlock various options in the game based on whether or not you skilled up this particular trait enough.
A cool thing, I think it's Dungeon World does it. Also, some things based on Dungeon World is that whenever a thing happens to your character, it adds an adjective, and so all of the kind of choices that get kept on your character are just adjectives. Like that character is now dazed, and what happens to a dazed character is different to what happens to a terrified character or an alert character, and using that more qualitative than this person has 300 HP.
It makes it, it's just a different way of doing interactive fiction in particular, because most interactive fiction takes the form of almost choose your own adventure type stuff.
Yeah.
And this gives it, I guess, a bit more of a lasting sense of permanence.
80 Days does it really well. There's a GEC book that's on the fault of how the character of Passepartout, based on choices that you make, has a little X and Y grid of personality types. So if you keep making more adventurous choices, it shifts that bar to be you are brave, and all of the kind of branching stuff is based on that X, Y grid of what your character is like.
Just follow on with the 80 Days comment. So Inkle Studios, who made 80 Days, it's open source to make free the tool and to write it. It's called Ink, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, Ink is absolutely fantastic.
So there's this thing we call choice games. So actually make people very well. So how much does I'm briefly looking at the coding aspect of doing choice games. How much is it can you learn from what you learned from choice games and transfer over to Twine?
I'm not familiar with their engine particularly. I've played a couple of their games, and I would probably say in a raw coding sense, I can't say, but from the feel of mechanics, they're pretty similar. Twine is at its heart a tool for doing branching narratives, and the Choice of Games series are very much branching narratives. So Choice of Games are probably as close to getting the Choose Your Own Adventure books in a digital format that I've ever played. You can do a lot of different things with Twine. That you can do very strict Choose Your Own Adventure type stuff, or you can do more esoteric things, or you can do like Anna Entropy did. No, it wasn't Anna. It was goodness, I can't remember her name. No, and this is horrible because I did a panel with her at GameRex in San Francisco a couple years ago. Starts with an M. It's completely escaping me, but she did a really awesome project about exploring being a transgender woman and her. Sorry. Yes, Maddie Rice. That's it. She did this really cool game about how people perceive her and kind of the challenges that she has to go through during the day being a transgender woman. Like, do I wear a dress that makes me feel more feminine, but maybe not going to pass as well? And she used Twine as a mock-up for the game that she ended up doing because it let her work this out really quick as a prototype. And so you can do a lot of really versatile things. And I don't think that Twine gets enough credit, probably because it is free to download and it does, at default, look like shit. But it's easy to make it not, and that's really what the point of this panel was.
A lot of the things that you learn about choice, like they're universal. A choice is a choice. How you code the choice is probably going to be different no matter what other system you go to. Like, ink is really great, but its syntax is totally different. Learning to think about how choices work is probably going to help far more than you can relearn the code.
I think a lot of the syntax for Twine 2 is pretty similar to markup, isn't it?
I don't know, I still use 1.4.
Oh, okay. So there's two versions of Twine. There's the sort of depreciated 1.4 version, and then they've got the new one. And all of them I've been showing is Twine 2, which I personally like a lot more, but there's some controversial choices, and there's some 1.4 diehards who are clinging onto it very aggressively.
I'm good at that, I just know how to hack it better. So when I figure out how to hack 2, I'll probably
Alright, we maybe have time for one more question?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, in terms of like narrative, conceptual, like planning out of one game, would you start with sort of like a default or a couple of default storylines and then branch out from there, or would you start with a bunch of endings, or?
I think that's kind of the how do you tell a story question all around. Because you said you tend to decide the bare bone skeleton and then you fill it in as you go along.
Yeah.
And that's my original background is as a novelist, and I've been really, really weird in contrast to every other novelist I've ever met that I write the story sequentially. And most novelists I know kind of just write a scene here and then write another scene and glue them together, and that's never been a way that I can tell stories. So the way I'm doing this is also still working down the branch that I anticipate the player to play as, and then merging choices together so that if they haven't done it in that route, they can still either have it reflect the other choices that they made elsewhere, or have it come back and still make it feel like they're involved in it.
Yeah. If you're really starting out and just want to make like a short thing to start with, think about like what is the, because Twine is also all about choice. Think about like what the big choice is, and just start with that moment and write and code that moment, and then you can kind of fill out afterwards and before, and then you can kind of like figure out where those should be, and then like you still have a really cool choice in the middle, even if it's a 5-second thing. You coded the cool choice that's the main point of the game. That's maybe where it differs from like writing a novel.
Yeah. Well, and also writing, and particularly video games like this, are a far more interactive experience, and you don't have control of the narrative the way that you do when you're writing a book that someone's going to read.
I think it all depends a lot on your personal style and how you work best, and sometimes also on whether or not you work alone or with writers, for example. So that's a real potential. But I'm working on a game right now that has 7 writers that need to be coordinated, so that's quite special. So we, for example, use a structure where the core team provides the overall world-building game story, and we have like this giant wiki of where people can look up, and then our 7 writers have access to that, and we have structured it in a way that they have 2 weeks to write a new story. 2 weeks to write a new story. At the end of the 2 weeks, we give them a new world building detail of the game, some like political conflict that happened, and they write towards that in some way, and it has been really fun. So sometimes it can be beneficial for you to just go along the line of what your player is going to do, and sometimes, depending on how you work, it can be beneficial to write the background of the story on the world first and fill in the blanks in between, or have other people work with you. So whatever works best for the game and how you work, I think. And I think it's always exciting to find your own style.
Yeah, and going back to the doing sketches, just start writing. Like just write and write and write and write.
There's, I often find that we get asked questions about what's X, Y, Z that will get me to this, and creativity doesn't work by rules, so never feel like because you're not doing something the way someone else said they do it, it may be it doesn't work for you that way. So that's one of the glorious things of being a creative person. You can find your own way that best resonates with you and gets you to a place where you can, create something.
Yeah, hopefully you can find the tools that you need on top of the engine you're using that will support that. Okay, I think we're kind of out of time. Our panels are going to be around outside for questions, maybe a little bit longer. I won't because I have a panel on. But thank you so much, Joshua and John, for sharing all of this.
Thank you for moderating.
Great. I think you are available on Twitter and wherever
Yeah.
for anyone who has questions for the resources or whatever you have.
Yeah, if there's anything that you couldn't see on the screen, I'm on Twitter at Joshua Meadows. I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I'm at Gridfish, GRITFISH.
Which is the best name.
It is, but everyone asks how to spell it. It looks really weird written down. But all of the Twine